Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey all, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today's episode is a coaching episode with Celine. Celine is the mom of 2 little ones who are 2.5 and 4.5. And she asked for help around bedtime and eating, 2 things that happen every day. So tough. We did talk a lot about the peaceful parenting mindset. So even if you don't have little ones and you don't have issues with bedtime or feeding, you might get something out of hearing us talk about mindset, especially when you are new to peaceful parenting and making that shift. As always, we appreciate any reviews on Apple Podcasts or rating us on Spotify or Apple and shares with friends. It's the best way that we can reach more people and help to spread the wonderful message of peaceful parenting. So let's meet Celine. Hi, Celine. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, nice to meet you. And we were just talking, you're in Belgium. I hear your accent. So just so folks know that where you are. And also you are relatively new to peaceful parenting. You were just saying it's just been a few months since you've even found out about it.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your family.
All right. So I'm a mom of 2 kids. I have a son who's 4.5 and I have a daughter who's 2.5. Then I have a husband.
Okay. And are your kids, I guess we'll learn a little bit more about them, but are they spirited, sensitive, or do you think they're more sort of
I'm
typical?
not sure I know all the definitions of strong-willed or sensitive. I would say my son is a little bit sensitive, but I don't think any of them are strong-willed. They have a good personality, but I don't think it's strong-willed. But then again,
okay.
I don't know the exact definition.
We'll find out. We'll find out.
Yeah.
How did you discover peaceful parenting and what made you decide that you wanted to try it?
This year, so beginning of 2024, I decided that I would need to make a change because I would yell a lot and I didn't like that. And also it doesn't help anyways. So I decided, it was mostly with my son. So first I decided to go see a psychologist. And while we did the work, she mentioned once that maybe I should see someone and see with me if there are some issues that could explain, because she said, your son is really fine. He's fine. And around that time, I don't know if it's the algorithm from YouTube and I stumbled on a video from Dr. Becky Kennedy. She was doing a TED Talk. And from there, I started listening. And then it was Dr. Laura. And then it was your podcast.
Great.
So
yeah. Nice. Yeah. You said them in order, probably in order of famousness.
Yeah, that's how it happened. That's how it came to me.
Yeah, cool. And so you were worried because you were finding things so frustrating with your son. You originally took him to a psychologist because you're like, there's got to be something wrong with this kid. And then the psychologist was like, what we typically find, what I always work with when I'm working with clients is it all comes down to us, right?
Yes.
I think it comes down to us and what we're bringing to the relationship and what we're bringing to all of the interactions. Welcome to the beginning of your journey. I think it's really nice that your kids are so little and that you've discovered this, because I think a lot of people don't discover this until their kids are much older, and then they feel a little bit sad that they didn't find it earlier. And for those people, we always say you have to forgive yourself for not knowing what you know before you knew it. However, in your case, it's lucky that you're still pretty newly on this new little kids.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's small.
All right. So how can I support you today?
Okay. So my first big issue is it's getting a bit better actually, but it's bedtime. So very recently, and that's when I emailed you, there's been a shift. So usually they both sleep in the same room. So we put my daughter first to bed and then 30 minutes later, my son. And usually she just stays in bed. She just says good night and that's it. And it's done.
Is she
And
in a
then,
crib? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just going to
no,
interrupt and
no,
interject.
it's a normal bed.
So a
It's a
toddler, like
one-person bed.
like a
And
bed with no
she
bars on it.
never
Okay.
came out of bed
Okay.
until I think it was 4 weeks ago. And she would come out, I don't know how many times. And so it would take forever for her to fall asleep. And then her brother would play with her. And then I was just getting mad. It was so difficult. And it was so
Aw.
doing it so sudden. Like one day she was sleeping and the next day she wouldn't anymore. So that's when I emailed you. And since then, I just accepted that she has to go to bed 1 hour later. I don't know why, and so it's gotten a bit better. I've tried to calm down, but I do have a really hard time when it's the end of the day, when I know that I have to put them to bed. In my mind, it's okay. It has to happen. I'm not very flexible. I have a really hard time being playful. I just want it to be done and have my free time. So I need
Totally
help with that.
understandable. Yeah. It sounds like she discovered that she can get out of bed.
Yeah.
Like some kids just don't, it doesn't occur to them until a certain point, and then they're like, wait a minute, there's nothing keeping me here. I can just get up.
Interesting.
So the other thing I wanted to ask you is, does she take a nap during the day?
Yes, she does still need a nap.
So it may be that, and also how's she doing with the bedtime just being later now? How is she? Do you think she's
It's
still getting
better
enough sleep?
now. It's shorter. She does drag it. So usually they can take 2 cards in their bed. And then, so now it's 2 cards and 2 books and 1 doll and the water bottle. And I'm like, okay, just take it and just stay in bed.
So right now, your strategy right now is that you're just letting them play a little bit until they fall asleep,
Yeah.
as long as they stay in bed.
Yeah. I want them to stay in bed and also not to fall asleep too late, because it is too late. If it's 10 p.m., I know it is too late for them. Now it's the summer, so it's okay. They don't have to wake up in the morning.
They'll sleep in the morning if they're up
Yeah,
late.
they've
They'll
never
sleep
been
in.
like late sleepers. Like the latest we could get is 8. They don't have to go to school or kindergarten, so it's okay. They can stay sleeping and I can just wake up and go to work.
Yeah,
But yeah, in September, it has to be better.
because they're going to be going to school or daycare in September. There's no reason why you can't shift and have your summer schedule and then your school schedule. I think sometimes parents are afraid that once we start doing this, we'll never be able to make any changes, and then it's going to be a disaster in September. And I'm sure that occasionally is true, but most of the time what I find is that if something is working for right now, then it's working for right now, and then you can always change it later. So how does it feel that it's working to you in terms of, first of all, is Amelia getting enough sleep? Even though you said you just have to go with the fact that she's, or I guess are both of them getting enough sleep, going with the fact that she is awake longer than she was in the past?
She looks fine and she does take her nap, and her nap is 2 hours long. So I think she's okay. And usually I see that there's going to be 1 or 2 or maybe 3 days where it's going to be difficult. And then the day after, it's going to be the regular time because they're exhausted. So
Okay. The other question I was going to ask you is, it could, or not question, actually. The other thing I was going to say was, it could be that part of the reason why she wasn't falling asleep as easily is that her nap is too long, and she's at 2.5. Most kids by around 3 are starting to not need a nap anymore. Some parents choose to still have them nap, or they have to because of daycare rules or something. But if they are going to nap 3 and older, it's going to make them stay up later at night. So it could be that when you do get to September and you want her to be going to sleep earlier, you might just think about not letting her sleep for that long in the afternoon, or telling whoever she's with.
I think at school they can do it for a little bit. I don't know. I think it's called pre-K. And then when they get to first year, I don't know how it's called in Canada, then usually they do not let them sleep anymore. I think until December she will get to sleep, and from January I think
that'll work out perfectly then, because that's around when she's going to be 3 in the middle of the year. So do you want to try to have something change about this, or are you good with how it's going?
I think I need help. So with me, because I get really so frustrated because I want it to go quickly. I want it to be done. And so when they come out of bed, when they start running in my room, they're like, oh, come out, or they're jumping on my bed, or I get really agitated. And I think it's really because it's the end of the day and lower resources, but every day. So I would need,
So is your partner around at night?
Depends. He works abroad a lot. And recently he was gone for very long. So yeah, it happens often that I have to do it on my own.
Okay, because I was going to say if he was around, maybe you could take turns being the parent on duty who's bringing them back to bed and getting them to stop jumping on the bed. But if you're pretty much solo at bedtime, that won't work. So it looks to me like we have two choices. We can either figure out a way to make them go to sleep earlier or help them to go to sleep earlier, which might look like, I know you've been a regular listener of the podcast, and we do have an episode on bedtime, best bedtime practices, which we'll link to in the show notes for anyone else. But in that, one of the things we talk about in that podcast is that some kids just need you to sit in the room with them to keep them from getting up and running around. And what I used to do with my kids way back in the day, there weren't phones or anything. You couldn't listen to a podcast, but I would just have a book light and read while they were falling asleep. And just every time they tried to get up, I'd say, lie down, time to sleep. And I would say they wanted me to stay in the room while they fell asleep. So I would say, I can only stay if you're still and quiet. So basically what we're looking at is there other support that they need to stay in bed, especially since they're in there together, which it's built-in playmate. It's hard if they're in there. If somebody was by themselves, it might not be as motivating to get up. But if there's somebody to play with, then, so that's one option, is we can look at how to support them, how you can support them to stay in bed and fall asleep faster. And the other option is, how can we work on your mindset so that you don't feel as annoyed by it? And so I always say when I'm coaching, sometimes there's a problem. And the problem in this case is that they're staying up later and running around. And then the solution might be the first thing that I outlined. And you have to decide which one is worse, right? Staying in bed with them or just letting them do their thing until they get tired and fall asleep. And it's totally up to you. There's not a right answer or a wrong answer. So which one do you feel like you're leaning towards?
I think the second one, because we try to have her go to bed first. And once she's sleeping, then my son will go. Usually that's how we go, unless she really stays up too late, but it's not so often in the end. And I don't feel like she's asking for me to stay. And also it would not be possible because my son would be there. And then he comes and he goes on the bed and he jumps and he says, oh, let's do this, let's do that. So it's better if I'm out, but I just...
Okay, so working on your mindset, you think is going to be the more reasonable thing. One thing that also comes into play with that frustration that you're feeling is if after they go to sleep is the only time you have in the day to do anything for yourself. Is that the case?
Yeah.
One thing some parents do, and I don't know if this would work for you, is just going to bed earlier and getting up in the morning before they wake up to have a little bit of time. Are you a morning person at all?
No.
Okay. I hear you. I am not. I could never. I don't think I ever once woke up before my kids. I would just sleep until they woke up.
You're
not a morning person. I'm still not. I used to think when I was younger, when I'm old, I'll wake up early. I'll be a morning person. And I'm like getting old and I still am not a morning person. So I think it's never going to change. So what's going on when you're feeling this frustration? What do you describe to me what it feels like and what's happening?
Yeah, I just feel like it's boiling in my body. And I'm thinking like, why are they not staying in bed? Now it's my time. Now I need like peace and they have to be in bed. And I played with them in the evening and I tried. I still don't call the special time. I know you've said in podcasts that it's good to name it, but I try to really be more present playing with them. Good. And so I'm just thinking about that and I'm like, come on, I've done all of that. Now you have to do what I say.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of just the frustration of you wishing that it were different, and also maybe a little bit of a trigger of them not listening to you. Both of those things.
Yeah.
And I think one thing to remind yourself when you're feeling frustrated is I actually feel like we should back up a little bit because I don't totally have a clear picture of when this is happening, the running around and getting up out of bed. Is it when your daughter is supposed to be sleeping and your son?
That was the issue, was my daughter coming out of it. My son has done that already for a while, so I'm used to it.
Okay.
But it was new with her. And the fact also that bedtime now was postponed an hour for both of them. So in the end, they would both be sleeping around 9:30, which is late. Then, there's not much time left for me. You still have to clean up the kitchen, maybe eat, because sometimes I don't eat with them because it's not nice.
Okay.
So it's, I have.
So she's just getting up. You tuck her in. And then the expectation isn't that he's going to go to bed then, but he's going to go to bed later. So you tuck her in and you're getting him ready for bed while when
Yeah,
she's
then
in
I go
bed?
back in the living room with him and we play and I set a timer and I say
Okay.
when the timer goes and I always check that she's sleeping on the little screen.
Okay.
Then we start putting the pajama, brushing the teeth.
Okay. So when is the running around happening that's so frustrating?
That's when it's both of them when it's their bedtime. So when I put them at different times, they both could when I put them, get out of bed, come out, ask for stuff, ask for a new car, ask for a book, ask for another kiss, ask for the water bottle.
Right. But right now she is falling asleep before.
Now it's getting better.
Okay.
It's not, it was really at its peak when I emailed you, when you said, oh, I can make podcast calls.
Yeah.
It's getting a little bit better because I just accepted that now it's 8 instead of 7.
Maybe that's why it's getting better, is because you accepted it instead of fighting against it.
But I think I need help with the mindset because like when that happens, I have a really hard time convincing myself that they're having a hard time. They're
That
not
you
giving
feels
me,
like
and
they're
I'm like, no, they are.
So what was your childhood like in terms of parenting?
You had to listen. You had to listen to what you were told.
That's what I was. That was what I was wondering.
Definitely.
I was wondering if there was some like. So what happens when we grow up with, even if our parents were wonderful, like a lot of us were raised with fear-based parenting, that you did not go against what your parents said, right? It just was not. It was just a non-issue, right? You just did what you were told. And for some people, it could mean if they didn't do what they were told, it could mean that they were spanked or yelled at. Or for other people, it could mean that they just knew that their parents were really, it felt conditional, right? It felt like they love me less if I'm not doing what they say. And anywhere on that continuum, it feels terrible for a child to not feel in the good graces of their parent or scared or whatever. So a lot of children will shape themselves to the safe, even if it's not actual danger, but like getting the love you need can feel as dangerous to a child, or not getting love you need can feel as dangerous to a child as being yelled at or spanked or whatever. So that child thinks, I will do the safest thing here, which is just to do what my parent says, right?
Yeah.
So when your kids aren't listening to you, there's not only the surface, this is really annoying that they're not listening because I'm trying to do the dishes or read my book or whatever it is. There's also little Celine who's saying, don't do that. This is not the safe thing for children to do. So there's like your as cheesy as it is, your inner child has those memories, like conscious or unconscious memories of bad things happen or could happen if you don't listen to your parents. They might not love you as much, or they might not be as nice to you, or they might yell at you or whatever. So when you are coming up against any situations where your kids aren't listening to you, try to tune into that little Celine feeling or voice, and even tell her, it's okay. You're a grown up now. You're safe. Everyone's still going to love you, even if the kids aren't listening. Because I think that is subconsciously what comes up. Does that resonate at all for you?
Yeah, I think that could be helpful. Yeah. Just to get back in a calmer place.
Yeah. So giving a little bit of love to your inner child, as I said, as cheesy as that sounds, and just remembering that this is different and that you are safe and nobody's going to get hurt or be unloved because they're not listening. And also, I think sometimes another part of that comes up there is that we culturally have this idea that good parents have, and I'm good in quotes, good parents have children who listen to them, right? So if you're feeling ineffectual and they're not listening, it can make us question, like, am I even doing a good job? And what's wrong with this picture that they're not listening to me? And especially if you've just made the switch to peaceful parenting and you're really working on not yelling and being kind and compassionate and empathetic, and they're still not listening, it can feel like, oh, what am I doing wrong here? The secret is that even if you switch to peaceful parenting from conventional parenting, it's not like a magic wand where your kids just listen to you automatically. Right? They still have their own will and their own desires and their own agendas where they don't want to go to bed. That is so boring, and they're away from you, and it's just not fun. So I think we have to remember that when that voice comes up of they're not listening to me, give yourself compassion. If you've been listening to the podcast, you've probably heard me say the phrase of, even though they're not listening to me, I'm still worthy and lovable. Yeah, you could. I saw you mouthing it. You knew what I was going to say. even though they're not listening to me, I'm still a good mom. I'm still a good parent. I'm still worthy and lovable. So really both those things, it's not conditional, right? It's not the good parents have kids who listen to them. Both of those things can be true at the same time. So giving yourself compassion in that moment, I think that's the second big piece of the mindset shift when things are going sideways. And then the third big piece is just really understanding that they want to be good, right? But they're just little and messy and they don't have impulse control yet, because the impulse control really doesn't even start to kick in until between the ages of 5 and 7 when kids are upset or excited. And so playing is like that excitement, mild excitement that you think of like people bouncing off the walls at a birthday party. And so they do want to be good. They just can't stop themselves from getting up and asking for that drink of water or another hug, because their need for connection or stalling bedtime is greater than their impulse control at this age. So they do want to be good. And so I think that is what can help you remember they're not giving me a hard time. They're having a hard time because they just don't have the impulse control yet for to do what they want to do, which is to do what you want to do, what you want them to do.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think also just that part of they want to be good, because that's what, as humans, that's how we survive, is through that close connection with a caregiver. So just really remind yourself I love this is from my mentor, Dr. Laura, they're acting like children because they are children. Right? They're acting like a 2 and a 4-year-old because they are a 2 and a 4-year-old and they don't have the impulse control and they don't want to go to bed and they want to keep getting up. So I don't know, those 3 things I think would be helpful in the mindset shift, and maybe even write down on an index card, because it can be hard to remember when you're in the moment. So I always like to say, write down on an index card, even they're acting like children because they are children, or what you said, they're not giving me a hard time, they're having a hard time. And remember to give myself some compassion, and this is not an emergency. Just maybe write down a few of those things on an index card and prop it up next to you wherever you are, or put it in your pocket.
In the kitchen. I can read it. Yeah. It will help. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So try that and see how it goes. Do you have any other like bedtime related things?
No, it's mostly that.
I'll add one thing, sorry, while you're thinking, is one thing we talk about in the bedtime podcast is just expecting that this is how it's going to go. Instead of, I'm going to put them to bed, they're going to be sound asleep by 8 o'clock, and then I'm going to have the rest of the evening to watch my show or knit or whatever you're doing. Just expecting that this is probably going to be hard. Go into it like you're preparing for running a marathon or something. This is not going to be easy, and reminding yourself it's a moment in time. It's not going to be like this forever. They're not going to need this level of support forever. My daughter tucks me in now.
Yeah, I'll be happy when it happens.
And of course, there is in between you having to do all this work and your kid tucking you in, but it is those few years of that extra high needs at bedtime. You're in the thick of it.
Well, thanks.
All right. And I think you said you had another issue that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. The other is mealtime. That's mostly with my son. The sister my daughter follows, she does what he does. But he's always had a hard time eating. So he can eat about anything, but he's just not interested in eating. He wants to play. He gets out of the chair. He runs in the sofa. And so she follows. She's a good eater. She can, if you let her be, she's going to eat her plate. But yeah, I don't know if you have tricks or ideas, or maybe it's again a mindset shift that I need, but it's quite, it's annoying because we know he needs to eat. He's not interested. So I always end up feeding him. That's okay. I've accepted. But how to maybe manage to keep him focused for 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah, that's 10 minutes is a reasonable expectation for a 4-year-old, I think. Are you at all concerned about his growth or his, I don't know what they do in Belgium, but is he normal on his growth curve?
Yeah, he's normal. Normal.
Yeah. What makes you think that so if you were to just, okay, let's go to the extreme. If you were to follow his lead and just let him eat, would he like get up and come back and get up and come back kind of thing? And just he eats like that?
No, I feel like you always have to be behind him and say, come on, take a spoon. And then I end up feeding him. So he plays and I'm the one giving him the spoon. So
is that for every meal?
A lot. Usually the evening meal. So if it's the breakfast, that goes okay.
That's what I was wondering, I was just wondering if maybe he's just not very hungry at the end of the day. Does he has breakfast and lunch? Is he at home for the summer?
Yeah.
Yeah. He eats a decent breakfast and lunch, and then it's mostly the evening meal where you have to
No,
follow him around?
I say mostly evening because, yeah, he had school until recently. And so at school, I cannot be there. I see what comes back in the lunchbox. But when we're home, like here for the summer, for lunch also, then you have to say, come on, eat and give him.
I guess I would wonder this. I'll give you some other ideas, but I guess I would wonder what would happen if you stopped following him around and feeding him. It's not a terrible thing to do. If it's working for you, I'm not going to, it's not like the recommended advice that you're supposed to let kids eat on their own. So they get used to recognizing their cues of when they're hungry and when they're full. However, it doesn't quite fit in this. Corey always says we're not the peaceful parenting police. And if something works for you, then it works for you, and don't feel bad about it. As long as you don't, I would say the danger would be that you were encouraging him to eat when he actually wasn't hungry, because that would mess with his cues of understanding his own body. If it is that he's just going through a period of being super active and you want to get a few bites of something into him at night so that he can sleep and he's not waking up in the middle of the night hungry, okay, keep doing that. However, I also would wonder what would happen if you stop doing that, if he would actually notice that he was hungry and eat.
Yeah, I think I've never tried, so I would have to try. It's just, obviously during the day, he comes and says, oh, can I have a cookie? Can I have an? I'm always like, no. So I would imagine, but then again, I never tried that he would not eat the dish and then during the day be asking for sweets. And
you're allowed to just say that's not on the way the division of responsibility in feeding works is that kids are offered a whole variety of food, and that including cookies and ice cream and chips and the things that we usually think of as food that you don't want to eat, only that stuff. But that is on the menu sometimes, but it's not always on the menu, right? It's on the menu sometimes, just not always. If he says, can I have a cookie? And that's not on the menu, you say, a cookie's not on the menu right now. What's on the menu is cheese and crackers or whatever peanut butter sandwiches or whatever it is. And he can choose if he wants to eat it or not. Because the division of responsibility, just to review, if you don't know what it is, parents decide what the kids eat and when. Kids decide if they eat it and how much. And they recommend, like, you've got meal times and then also regular snacks. So the idea isn't that, and you always also want to have things that kids will eat. It's not that every single meal is something that you don't think that they will like or that they will eat. The idea isn't that they're going to go hungry or eat food they don't like. But you could try and see what happens. Like, we're going to talk again in a couple of weeks. And you could try and just say something to him, Sebastian, I've been following you around and feeding you while you're playing. And what I realize is that it's your job to feed yourself and that you need to listen to your tummy and decide if you're hungry or if you want to eat it. And when he does ask for food, give him things that you don't mind him eating.
Yeah.
Or this is like a funny podcast because I'm also like, or just keep doing what you're doing if it's working for you. Like I can
try. I can try. It's just difficult when we're all sitting, and I know it really annoys my husband also when we're all sitting. Come on, now you have to eat, and he just gets out and he takes 3 trucks and he just.
So in that case, why don't you set a timer and just say, sit with us for 10 minutes. I don't know if you have a visual timer, but that can be helpful.
Yes, I got that recently.
Yeah. So get the visual timer out and say, sit with us for 10 minutes and we're going to talk about the day. That's another thing, is that sometimes we use that time to catch up with our partner instead of having it be like a warm family interaction. So you could do something like I know on the internet, there are 50 questions, 50 conversation starters for kids, things like that you could look at. And you could have a topic that you discuss with both of the kids. Some families do something called rose, bud, and thorn, where you talk about the rose is something that happened to you that you liked for the day, and the bud is something that you're looking forward to, I think, and the thorn is something that you didn't like about your day. So you could do things where you're going around the table with the food in front of him and you're engaging him to stay at the table because it's a nice family activity. So that's one thing you could try. And if you can get up in 10 minutes and just keep reminding him, remember, we're going to sit here for 10 minutes, look at the timer, we're going to have a conversation and just keep gently reminding him, we're going to sit here for a few more minutes and see if that helps him focus a little bit on the food. You could try that.
Yeah, that's also a good one.
And then I would say after the 10 minutes, if he's gotten up and he hasn't eaten what you think is enough, maybe you can offer him a bedtime snack that's, not too exciting, or he could finish his dinner before he goes to bed if he actually is hungry. But it is a good time to start encouraging him to check in with his tummy. And then maybe at the end of 10 minutes, the timer's going off or about to go off, and you say, okay, sweet pea, check in with your tummy. Is your tummy still needing some food? Is your tummy still hungry? And see what he says. Yeah. And I think most kids eat what they need. And sometimes for us, and there are exceptions, right? There are exceptions if there's like some sensory challenges, or if we've been pressuring them a lot, they might refuse even if they are hungry. There also are some kids who have some neurodivergence that might make cueing into that more challenging. But most typically developing kids will eat the food that they need.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the idea is that you just want to think about, do you want to do this? And if you do want to do it, the big idea is you're putting him in the driver's seat for who's in charge of eating, while you're setting a few parameters around sitting at the table for 10 minutes and checking in to see if your tummy's still hungry, and having that 10-minute be like a nice warm family time.
Yeah, I think that's good. And then that gives him, like you say, that he can decide and he's responsible. So maybe that's good too. Yeah, you always want to give them, you always feel like they're not eating enough. But yeah, after all, we're smaller and
yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I heard once that you should think about, like, small children think about what they eat in terms of what they've eaten over the course of a week rather than a day. Yeah. And sometimes they do. I think toddlers, I know he's older typically than, he's not really a toddler, but they're famous for seeming like they live on air. And they do go through growth spurts where they eat a lot and then they don't eat very much for a little while. But the fact that he is eating pretty good breakfast and okay lunch makes me think that by the end of the day, he's just not very hungry.
Yeah.
The problem would be if, like, at bedtime, he was like, I'm so hungry. So that's why I would say offer a snack before you start the bedtime routine.
Yeah. To always ask him, is your tummy hungry before? Yeah. Otherwise, he's going to come out of bed, eat, and I will have to.
I'll never forget my oldest son, when he was probably around the same age, 4 or 5, we'd get him all ready for bed and he'd get in bed. And then he'd call downstairs, I'm hungry, I want some cereal. And it was driving me totally insane. And I was telling my father, and my dad said, why don't you just give him some cereal before you get him ready for bed? I was like, that is such a good idea. And sometimes it's simple things, right? And so he started having a bowl of granola or something before he went to bed, and it worked out great.
Yeah.
But sometimes we resist these things that seem, when you look at it, like, oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that will be simpler. Yeah. Less trouble.
And I think also maybe part of it for you, I'm not sure, but I think as parents, we see food as nurturing, and that it feels like good caretaking to make sure your kid's eating a lot. And I think especially in certain cultures, food is very part of the nurturing, right? So I don't know, maybe there's something there for you that you look at. Does it mean something subconsciously to me that he's not eating enough? Does it feel like I'm not being a good mom or something?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's that, but I think I'm just used to, also when I was small, like, you had to finish your plates. I think it's that. So now we do what I do sometimes also, because he asks me, he says, so how many spoons? And I'm like, 10. You have to eat 10 spoons. But yeah, that's also not listening to his cues. But it's just reassuring to be like, okay, he had some food in him. But yeah, I should.
Maybe when he says how many spoons, why don't you turn that around? That's a really fun game you can play and say, why don't you count how many spoons it's going to take until your tummy feels full?
Oh yeah, it's a nice point on it.
And then it can be like, how many, you can guess. Okay, how many spoons do you think it's going to be? And then compare afterwards. And your daughter can do it too, right?
So she's really easy. It's just that she follows him. If he gets out of the table and he goes to get something, she's going to do the same. But otherwise, if you let her be, she will eat everything and usually ask for more. So that's also the contrast between the two of them. Like she's smaller, but she eats way more than him.
She's probably growing more right now. I was just thinking back to another podcast episode we had with Jennifer House, who's a nutritionist, and she talked about the importance of having a good supportive chair for kids. So that's something, I don't know what kind of chair he's sitting in, but kids are supposed
to. I don't know if you have that in Canada, the trip trap from, I don't know, it's a Swedish.
Is it the adjustable chair
that you can put
high? Right. So do his feet have a footrest?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's one thing she said, is that we shouldn't have swinging, dangling feet, like either a stool or a footrest for them to put their feet on. And the other thing I was going to say is maybe there's the support. So whenever as parents, we have our expectations for our kids. So for you, it's 10 minutes and making sure that he eats enough that he's not going to be hungry in the middle of the night. And then there's what's actually happening, right? And then there's the gap between the expectations and reality. So what sort of support does he need to meet your expectations? And in this, it's not that he has to eat, but that you want to make sure that he's slowed down enough that he isn't hungry when dinner's over. And sometimes that could look like what we talked about already, like the conversation or the rosebud thorn thing. Or it could be like he can sit in your lap, or your daughter maybe
often.
Yeah. Or your daughter can sit in your lap if she keeps getting up. Just be like, come here, sweet pea, sit in my lap and finish your dinner. And that could be another level of support as well.
And for their age, would it be reasonable to expect them to stay until everybody's finished, or that's just
that's just, if they're happy to, great. But that is probably too long of a time to expect them to be happy sitting at the table.
Yeah.
I think it's a reasonable expectation to say, go play and let your dad and I finish eating dinner.
Yeah.
That they're not like being too like interrupting and disruptive if they don't want to stay at the table, but they could just go play while you're finishing.
Yeah.
There are once you start parenting, I think you realize that there are the rules of when you were growing up. You finish what's on your plate, you stay until everyone's done. And that, first of all, why do you have to do that? And second of all, that kids aren't built like that. And we used to have a lot of expectations for kids that were hard for them or unreasonable for them to follow.
Yeah, that's good.
And maybe also talk about different expectations. If you're at a restaurant, you're going to sit at the table until everyone's done eating, because that's what you do at restaurants. Or if you have company for dinner, still, I don't know, like how far you want to take that. But I guess I'm just trying to introduce the idea that sometimes you can have things go one way for just the four of you or the three of you eating dinner. And then sometimes it can go another way. And you talk about the expectations for the situation that you're in.
Yeah, that I had heard it podcast. And once we had to go to the restaurant, and I told them before and I explained, and we took some toys. And it went really well that day. And everybody was like, oh, wow, they were so nice. I was like, yes, they were.
Good. I love that you did a great thing by setting the expectation beforehand and supporting them with the toys so that they could stay at the table without it being too hard for them.
Yeah.
So you set it up for them to be successful. That's great.
Yeah, that was nice.
Yeah. All right. You've got some stuff to work on. We will talk in about 3 weeks if we can align our schedules, and we'll see how everything went.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Celine. Hello, Celine. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, Sarah.
How are things?
It's going okay. I feel that my mindset is getting better, which is what I really needed. So for bedtime, it is still sometimes a bit of a struggle. I had emailed you because when I'm alone, my son comes in when I put my daughter to sleep, and he jumps on the bed and he gets her excited. Needed your input. But after that, we went on vacation. My husband was home, so it was easier because he could take care, other people could take care of him. So I didn't get to try what you told me. But
so just for everyone else, what I said
in the future.
Yeah, what I suggested was that it's hard for a 4-year-old to do what they know they're supposed to do, which is stay out of the room. So giving him something to distract him, like I suggested an audiobook to listen to, maybe with headphones, listen to an audiobook and color, like double distraction, do some coloring while he's listening to an audiobook. I know Corey, the coach that works with me, I forget the name of it, but she has these things that are like, they're only audiobook players. I'll ask her what they're called and we'll put it in the show notes, but it's something that you could get different cards, she said, and you can put them in and all they do is play audiobooks.
So it's not like an iPad or a phone or something like that. They're like purely an audiobook player.
Yeah, he has a player that he actually started playing with after we discussed, and I hadn't even showed it. And it's also is like a little radio, and he has to turn, and he picks the characters and what they're gonna do, and it's short stories. And he's starting to use it, so
well, you can try that.
Yeah, I will try that.
Okay, and what did you?
But my mindset.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. What did you feel was helpful about the mindset? Like,
I would tell myself a lot. It's not an emergency.
Good.
That one helps me a lot. It's not an emergency. And also I know that it's the summer. And once school starts, I know they will get more tired in the evening. So I'm counting on that as well. But it's not an emergency, really helps me. So that one, so that's what I tell myself. And also, like you had said, sleeping is boring. It's just fun. They want to play.
Yeah. Good.
So it helps. I still get mad, of course, but less.
Good. It's hard. It is hard. It's hard. You're tired. It's the end of the day. You want some time to yourself. Like, for sure, it's going to be a frustrating situation. And and even if you do have a perfect mindset, it's still hard. But there's just something. It's like when you have little kids, there are just things that are hard, and you can't really change it. And they will grow and they'll change and they won't need you to put them to bed anymore.
It will pass.
So exactly. And the one thing you can control is your mindset.
Yeah.
And of course, there is
that. And also you had told me.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. You had told me not to expect that it was going to go nice and easy and they just go sleep and I have my sweet time. So I also tried not to expect much.
Yeah. So, there's another thing you can change is your expectations, your mindset and your expectations.
Yeah.
And of course, what I was going to say was, of course, you want to try to do scaffolding and make it easier to try to support them to have the best. It reminds me of, so my first child was a terrible sleeper. He didn't sleep through the night until he was like almost 3. And my second child, I thought, spoiler alert, none of my kids slept through the night until they were 3. But my second child,
that's long.
I was like, I bought all these sleep books and I tried everything except for cry it out because I didn't want to do that. But I tried the schedules and I forget now what it was, but like all of the things I could do. And he still was not a good sleeper. And I realized at a certain point, I'm just driving myself mad. Like I can't control his sleep. All I can do is make the best possible environment for him to sleep and set it up as well as possible, but you can't actually make anyone sleep. So there are things you can do, but ultimately, like you could do, set them up for success as much as possible, but you actually can't make anyone sleep.
No, that one doesn't work. Not yet.
Okay, so what about the food
stuff?
The mealtime stuff? And
so the mealtime. So I did straight away use the suggestion you gave about telling him, ask your belly how many spoons you want to eat. So if he would start straight away asking me how many spoons, I would say, just ask your belly, see what your tummy is telling you. So that's what we did. And I don't think I have, spoon fed him since we talked, which I would do all the time. I haven't done it anymore. I just tell him, see what your tummy tells you. And
he's eating.
And so that's much. He's eating. Yeah, I think I even pay less attention to how much he's eating. I'm just telling him, ask your belly, see if you're still hungry. Sometimes he eats a little bit more. He says, I think my belly says 3. And then you see that he eats a little more and I just don't say anything. And the only thing I tell him when he's done, I say, okay, just bring your plate back to the kitchen and then you can go play. That's the only thing. And that's already also nicer for me. But that's mostly for me. My husband still has a hard time with that. And we went on vacation with my family. And I could see also it's, difficult for them. Like, he's not eating. Or everybody was like, come on, you have to eat 3 spoons and then you can watch something. I was staying quiet because it's too many people and you cannot always
and why bother?
Do what you want. But I was
why bother getting in a big thing about it? Like you could just go back to what you are doing when you got home.
Yeah. So that's what I try to do. And I already, I'm less stressed. I just let him eat what he wants to eat and then that's it. And also try to remember, like you said, they have a smaller stomach. Maybe he had enough food during the day already, and it's the evening, he's not so hungry anymore. So I just try to let it go. The only thing was because he tends, of course, to ask for all the good stuff. So like you said, I tried to say it's not on the menu, or no, you can have an apple instead, or offer something else if he asks too much for like sweet stuff. But it has helped me.
Good.
To see it that way. Yeah.
That's great. Less stress is awesome.
Yeah.
It sounds like less stress all around for you in terms of both of those, the issues that we talked about, is feeling a little less stressful.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a whole, I listened to the podcast for about, I think it was a clean plate, or I don't remember how it was called. So about the division of responsibility, it is difficult. The part where the child is responsible is really difficult. If he wants to eat, that's really okay. If he wants to eat, I really have to repeat it to myself. He doesn't want to eat. He doesn't want to eat.
You know, and just give yourself a little bit of inspiration to keep doing it, is you want him to grow up, and your daughter too. You want them to grow up into people who know their bodies and know when they've had enough and know when they're hungry, and to be in touch with their appetites. And that's what you're doing right now. That's the gift you're giving him now. That with the whole line of check in with your tummy, you're teaching him that skill. And a lot of grownups who were told to clean their plate or forced to eat more than they wanted to, or not given food when they were hungry because their parents thought they were eating too much, they turned into grownups who don't know their own fullness cues or hunger cues. And they have trouble around food.
Yeah, I'm trying. And then I had also, asked you in the email about that, about the desserts when he eats. So you had sent me a link about dessert from a blog post. I also read it, but I think I need to read it a few more times to get all the info, because it is so different from what I'm used to that I have to, just change my ideas, my views.
Yeah. And so that was about about sugar and basically that division of responsibility. Desserts. It's division of responsibility. Suggestion is to give dessert with dinner, and to have children be able to have regular access to, quote, forbidden foods, including like chips and sweets and things like that. And the idea being that if they have regular access, they'll be able to self-regulate more. If it's like the forbidden food.
And it's less of a exactly. Yeah. So that's something I'm working on. But it's interesting, and it's a nice way to see things differently.
And you know, there are some kids that just as a sidebar for anyone else who's listening, that there are some kids who don't get that self-regulation cue, and they need to be taught mindful eating. And I actually did a podcast episode about that with a guy who studies ADHD and eating disorders. And there are some people who just never, children / people who don't get that cue of, oh, I've had enough. They just don't get the off switch. And so if you ever notice that happening, I do have a podcast about it that you can listen to. But
we'll look for it. But they seem to know.
I think most kids do know, but I think there are some kids who, whether it's because they have interoception challenges or I don't even know why, but there are some kids where they wouldn't stop eating chocolate cake if you followed that. They would, or they don't know when they're full. They don't know when they've had enough. And for those kids,
I just had one more question.
Sure. I was just going to say, for those kids, the answer is not telling them when they've had enough, but the answer is to try to teach them the skills to check in with their tummy the same way you're doing with your son.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your question?
So my question was more about that time. So when it's taking really long and I'm starting to start boiling up, I tend to tell them, okay, now I'm not being happy. I'm not happy with you. And I'm not sure that's a good thing to say, because then they say, are you happy now? Are you happy now? Are you happy with me? And I'm like, yes, I'm happy with you.
Yeah, okay, you can shift that.
I don't know if there's a different way to turn.
You don't want them to feel like your love is conditional, like happy with them, not happy with them.
Yeah.
You also don't want to make them feel responsible for making sure you're happy. That you don't want to flip that they're responsible for your feelings, right? But you can say that you're frustrated because you're human, and we don't want to hide our feelings from our children. So you can say, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. I'm really tired and I want to go to bed too. And I'm feeling frustrated, and I'm going to go step out of the room and take a break and take some deep breaths and try to calm myself down. So you can share that you're frustrated.
Okay.
And I think that's a good word to use, like frustrated. And because I'm really tired and I want you to go to sleep, and I'm going to you don't say this part, but I'm going to take responsibility for my own feelings by taking a break, taking some deep breaths and modeling that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's good. I will try to remember to say that instead.
Because
the fact that they repeated, I was thinking, I think it's shouldn't.
Yeah. Well, and also kids really do. They want us to be happy with them, right? And they they feel bad if they feel like we're not happy with them. So we really work towards the idea that children feel lovable and worthy even when they mess up or even when we're frustrated, that it's not conditional. Which is tough.
Yeah, it is. But we learn every day.
All right. I hope that things continue to feel less frustrating, and you can just if you ever find yourself slipping, just bring yourself back to those mindset and expectation adjustments that you've made and keep following the food stuff. And I think you'll do great.
Thank you so much
for coming on and sharing. It always helps other parents. I hear that all the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.